What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm back with a video where this time once again, we're going to talk about the importance of winning championships and winning in general, and how in the past 10 years championships, from an overall legacy standpoint, have been really devalued by fans as well as some NBA players. So with that being said, let's get into the video and look at the importance of winning and why it matters to a player's legacy and his overall standing in NBA history. So from an NBA fan standpoint right now, winning and championships, it's a pretty touchy subject and pretty controversial. But if you go back in history, winning and being number one has always meant something. But now in 2021, in the modern era, I think championships and their importance have been watered down by NBA fans. And of course, you still have some players who value winning, like Giannis Antetokounmpo, was a very old school mindset. But from an overall standpoint, winning championships is on the forefront of most NBA players' minds. And throughout this video, I'm going to give you guys some quotes from the absolute best NBA legends and show how important winning was to them. And the first quote I want to bring up is from the big fundamental, Tim Duncan. Quote, "If we win, I'm happy. The rest of it is just stuff." Possibly the most Tim Duncan quote of all time, short and to the point, and it makes complete and total sense. And if you are watching this video, there's a pretty good chance you fall in one of two categories. The first category being that championships do not matter to a player's legacy. The second category being that championships 100% matter. And there's also a very, very small third category where logical and rational NBA fans come together. That is combining both winning and team accomplishments with individual success as well as individual awards. If you're already in that sweet spot of balance, congratulations, but if you aren't, hopefully by the end of this video I'll convince you that championships as well as stats and individual accolades can all be combined together to evaluate an NBA player. And really the first thing I want to do in this video is look at the championships don't matter crowd. And when I talk to these people, the main arguments I see is that basketball is a team game, winning is a team accomplishment, and it should have no standing on where a player ranks all time. Also, one thing I hear a lot is that stats and individual numbers, that really defines a player and how great they were. And the last thing I hear a lot is you can't fault a player for not winning championships or making deep playoff runs consistently. Now, out of those 3 points, the first one I look at is the team accomplishment argument. And to start out, I will say it, basketball, yes, it is a team game and not an individual sport. But with that being said, a player in basketball can have an immense impact on winning and the outcome of a game. I mean, look at the 2007 Eastern Conference Finals. LeBron James scored 29 out of his team's last 30 points. LeBron absolutely carried his team down the stretch and got them a victory. But in the end, it was a quote-unquote team accomplishment, but LeBron James was definitely more responsible for his team winning. Look to Kobe in the 2006 season, where he scored 81 points. In that game, the Lakers, they won by 18 points, but who gets the majority of the credit for his team winning? Was it Kobe who scored 81, or was it Smush Parker who scored 13? Obviously, Kobe the superstar deserves more credit than the role player. So my point is, superstars in basketball, unlike football, baseball, or even soccer, can have a huge impact on a game and the outcome of that game. And regarding championships, please stop bringing up Robert Horry, who has 7 rings. Yes, Robert Horry is an all-time great NBA champion, but when it comes down to it, he was a role player on virtually all those teams. He wasn't better than Duncan, wasn't better than Shaq or Kobe, and he certainly wasn't better than Hakeem. And speaking of Hakeem, let's look at his first championship team that also featured Robert Horry, which was the '94 Rockets. Hakeem during this playoff run averaged 29, 11, and 4 with 4 blocks and 2 steals. Some pretty all-time great numbers. What makes it even better is that Hakeem led his team in all 5 of those stat categories: points, rebounds, assists, as well as steals and blocks. He absolutely carried the '94 Rockets to that championship, and it's widely recognized as one of the best carry jobs, one of the most valuable championship rings in NBA history. So with that being said, does Robert Horry get the same credit for that championship as Hakeem Olajuwon? Does Kenny Smith, does Sam Cassell, Vernon Maxwell, did they equal the production of Hakeem? No, they did not. And I really want to look at this Rockets team, because when it comes down to it, Hakeem was their only superstar and their only all-star caliber player. So in theory, if basketball was purely a team sport, how could this Rockets team ever win a championship? It was Hakeem, one superstar, with a bunch of role players. So in effect, Hakeem's dominant championship run shows that superstars in the NBA can have a huge impact on both ends if they're an all-time great player. Once again, showing basketball is not purely a team game. You have to evaluate the roster, how that player played, and how important they were to the overall team success. Now the next argument that we hear a lot, that stats that defines players and how good they are. And me myself, I use stats a lot in my videos. I understand they're important. Look at the advanced stats, the clutch stats, the traditional stats. Stats at the end of the day, yes, they are important. But as you guys know, stats as well as polls, they can be twisted and manipulated in certain ways. And the phrase numbers never lie is an absolute fallacy. As let me do a blind comparison of 4 NBA players from the 2014 season. You have one player who averaged 17-6-6, another who averaged 18-4-4, one on the far right who averaged 18-3-2, and the last one who averaged 17-6-3. So based off the raw numbers and the stats, who do you think was the best player during the 2014 season? I'll let you look over the numbers and make your pick. So now after pausing and making your choice, let me show you guys who these 4 players are. The player who averaged 17-6-6 was Michael Carter-Williams on the 19-win Philadelphia 76ers. The guy who averaged 18-4-4 was Aaron Aflalo on the 23-win Magic. The guy on the far right was Nick Young for a Lakers team that won 27 games. And lastly, you have Tony Parker for a Spurs team that won 62 games. So when looking at the raw stats and the data, all these players are fairly equal. And I would even argue Aaron Aflalo has the best overall stats out of the bunch. But as you guys know, Tony Parker in 2014 was playing on a loaded Spurs team with Kawhi Leonard, Boris Diaw, Tim Duncan, as well as Manu. Once again showing stats, in the end, they can lie. And kind of building off that, I want to emphasize how much a team's roster can affect a player's stats. Let's look at a player currently playing, that being Jeremy Grant. In 2020, Jeremy, he played on the Denver Nuggets, then went to the Western Conference Finals and were a real championship contender. During that season, he averaged 12-4-1. Now after that year, Jeremy would take his talents to Detroit. Now in Detroit, they were a god-awful team, one of the bottom feeders of the Eastern Conference, compared to the Nuggets, who once again were one of the top teams in the West. In this past year, Jeremy averaged 22-5-3. So looking at the gap in stats from 2020 to 2021, I personally don't think Jeremy Grant got drastically better. But what changed was the overall situation surrounding him. He went from being the 3rd or 4th option to being the clear-cut #1 guy on a bottom-feeding team. Once again showing stats they can lie and be a little bit inflated or manipulated by your team situation. Also, one big factor with stats is the team's offense and the system they run. And for this, I would look at the greatest player of all time, that being Michael Jordan. And as you guys know, Jordan, before Phil Jackson was the head coach, did not run the triangle offense. In his best scoring season, he averaged 37.1 points per game on 48% shooting. In 87 Jordan, he was great, but he wasn't peak Michael Jordan. Peak Michael Jordan would be in 1993, where Jordan averaged 32 points per game on 49% shooting. So during that 6-year period, did Jordan get worse stats-wise? Yes, but as a player, got tremendously better on both ends. And once again, the triangle offense was a team-oriented offense that took the ball to Jordan's hands and let his teammates get more involved. So the stats may decrease, but Jordan as a player got tremendously better. Also during that time period, the Bulls as a team got drastically better, winning 3 straight championships. So Jordan in the 90s compared to the 80s took a step back offensively and sacrificed to win more games as well as championships. And that is another big time factor that gets really underrated for looking at stats as well as championships. In my personal belief, I will always side with a player who values winning over individual stats. And Jordan during that time period once again took a step back so his team could take 2 steps forward. And one of the all-time great centers had the exact same mindset, that being Shaquille O'Neal. Saying, quote, "The day I stopped worrying about stats is the day I started winning." Now speaking of winning championships, there are countless NBA legends who never made it to the top of the mountain. Guys like Elgin Baylor, Chris Paul, John Stockton, Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, Reggie Miller, as well as James Harden. And in my personal view, they're all top 50 all time. With that being said, if they had a Larry O'Brien, they would rank a little bit higher on my all-time list. Because once again, championships for superstars mean a lot more than a championship for a role player. I mean, look at a guy like John Stockton, has 0 championships, but all the assist records you can think of, compared to someone like Mark Madsen, who has 3 championship rings. Now, is any sane person going to argue Mark Madsen is a better basketball player or a greater player than John Stockton? No, they're not, because they know context and they have an IQ above 12. Every rational NBA fan knows when you compare championships, you compare superstars to superstars, not John Stockton to Mark Madsen. So please stop being disingenuous and comparing superstars to role players to argue championships don't matter. Now, when talking about basketball legends who don't have a championship ring, you can look at a lot of those names and say those players had bad luck or a bad organization, and in most cases, you would be right. With that being said, those players are the exception to the overall rule, and a guy like Kevin Garnett, who was stuck in Minnesota for over a decade, it was simply bad luck that he was drafted to the Timberwolves. And some might argue KG proves championships don't matter to a player's legacy, but I think the exact opposite, because Kevin Garnett himself valued championships and knew how much they meant. As in 2007, he agreed to be traded to the Boston Celtics, once again showing KG knew how important championships were to a player's overall legacy. Add in the fact he's a fierce competitor and highly intense, there's no doubt Kevin Garnett always put winning first, and in Boston, he finally had a real shot to win championships. So unfortunately for some players like KG, they're stuck on terrible teams and bad organizations. But at the end of the day, championships still matter despite those players getting the short end of the stick. Now, if you've made it this far in the video so far, thank you for doing that, and here's my final conclusion. First off, never compare championships for a role player to a superstar. It's inaccurate and it makes no sense. Secondly, reward players who put winning first and try to get into winning situations as well as sacrifice for their teams. Number 3, if a player never wins a championship, that doesn't mean he's a bum or not a great player. He could still be top 25 or top 50 all time, but from an all-time standing, a championship would definitely boost him up on the all-time rankings. So he's still great, but he's not as great as he could be with a Larry O'Brien trophy. And lastly, the team accomplishment moniker is simply too broad of a term and eliminates the end game of basketball, which is winning and winning championships. And for any superstar in NBA history, what was their main goal every single season? To lead their team to a championship. And simply ignoring the pursuit of a title and writing it off as a team accomplishment that doesn't matter, it's simply ignorant to NBA history. So that right there is my final conclusion on championships as well as winning. And this video is going on way too long, so as always, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, I'll see you guys next time.